That was the final question I wanted to ask you, and this will do a lot more. And again, I think this essentialism or liberation is weaved into all of this. But talk about the work you're doing in South Carolina. We're going to talk about it a lot more on the show. At some point, I really want to come and visit and see what's going on, because this is where the rubber meets the road, and you're actually doing it. So talk about it, please, a little bit.
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, just to put this on your calendar, the South Carolina AFL-CIO is having its legislative conference on the 30th of this month. So I'm just saying.
Great. Thank you. Yeah.
Well, I mean, we decided, and we as the Debs Jones Douglas Institute, decided to target South Carolina for a Medicare for All campaign. And we really, we started off nibbling around the edges back last summer. But we really sort of crafted in the action plan, and we got things rolling in early December. And we targeted South Carolina for several reasons. I mean, the first one was we've worked down there for 20 years and have connections, right, all the way through the labor movement, including like the newly elected president of the state Fed was one of the people who was involved in creating the South Carolina Labor Party in
that's cool.
06 and 07, which is a vehicle that we have there that could be used, and is deeply committed to the Medicare for All struggle, which he sees as part of rebuilding the Federation, and also his objectives of asserting labor's voice as a force to be reckoned with in South Carolina politics, and he understands that that the Fed ought to be a leader in the Medicare for All campaign, and sees that as part of creating space for the union movement to expand. Right, it's not a matter of pulling up the gangplank and saying, well, we got our health and welfare fund, so I mean, hell with you. But also because South Carolina is an emblematic place in politics, certainly, and especially around this fiction of the black vote and this idea of South Carolina as being a firewall for Dems. And look, between early December and the primary, we got more than 10,000, maybe even close to 12 or 13,000 people who signed pledge cards, indicating that they wanted to vote only for candidates who supported Medicare for All. So, I mean, there's a base, down there, right, to build on and to build from, and our message to people has been all along that all the rest of these assholes are going to be gone on March 1st.
Right.
But I mean, we're here, like we're trying to finish crafting phase 3 of the organizing project now. If I may, I'd like to kind of escape for a second here, right, because I think it's really important for us to get straight about what this black vote thing is.
Yes, please go ahead. Please.
And I've spent the last couple of days puzzling over this and talking to comrades and stuff. Among other things, I wanted to reconstruct like the origins of this line, right? Of the line that any Democratic candidate to be successful has to win this thing called the black vote. And the next step from that is that South Carolina stands out because it's the first state with a heavy concentration of black voters. Pardon me. So I was thinking about this. It's a line that really originated in 2016 with the Clinton campaign, right? And it rested on a kind of partial reinvention of the Obama narrative from 2008, right? because that narrative is that Obama became really viable and a real contender when he won South Carolina.
And I'm old enough to remember, I just because essentialism gives and takes. I'm old enough to remember when Bill Clinton went out and said, South Carolina, you know, whatever, Jesse Jackson won it. That was their line in 08.
No, that's right. Right. And in fact, the reality is that Obama's real boost came from that field operation that he put together in Iowa.
Right.
Right. But so like then I'm thinking, well, then what's the work that this narrative does? If, as Cedric Johnson pointed out in 2016, and we just did like in a little piece we did in Common Dreams, that these are, first of all, I mean, the southern states that have the heaviest concentration of black voters in the primaries are, first of all, states that know that Democrats going to win in November, right? Right. And the logic according to which people vote in those states is kind of idiosyncratic and complex, just like all voting is. Because the number one problem with the idea of the black vote is that the black vote is a ventriloquist dummy, right? Right, because black people vote in a lot of different ways for a lot of different reasons, right? It's understandable that in the southern states that are dominated by not just Republicans, but the worst rabid right-wing Republicans, that voting would come to be functionally driven more by defensive imperatives than by aspirational ones, right?
Right.
And I mean that makes perfect sense. And so what happened? And look, I mean, there's nothing else that the Sanders campaign could have done. So it was kind of sandbagged in this way, because if you try to challenge the narrative and say, well, actually, South Carolina doesn't matter worth a hill of beans, right?
Right.
Because there's no way anybody's going to, right?
Right.
Then you know what you get, right? Disrespecting black voters, right? I mean, so forth and so on. So, I mean, that meant that the campaign had to try to compete on an environment, on terrain that was all uphill.
And isn't this like just in the last couple of minutes? I mean, this is something that I try to bang on about. I've learned a lot from you, but it's also just common sense. I mean, okay, there obviously, I'm going to just make it really simple. I mean, if you experience racism because you're, have an interaction with a cop because of your race, or you're denied a loan because of your race, that is a that is a universally extrapolated. That's racism, and that's it. Simple, direct. And then conversely, actually, where we get to this like woke liberal essentialism, to use their nomenclature, it erases, like, I always use the example of New York City. I mean, just even understanding Harlem, Manhattan, black political tradition and machines and revolutionary impulses, and all of that is totally different in many key ways than, Brooklyn black politics. In terms, migration, immigrate, where like somebody who came to New York from the Great Migration, who came to this country as property and has roots in the South, versus somebody who is second generation from Barbados. I mean, these are, and again, I'll keep reiterating for people who don't get it, those same two people can absolutely be the victim of American racism, obviously. Right. But conversely, to say that they're exactly the same voter, in fact, if you want to play that game, it's racist. I mean, it's a radically different, and we see this like even in 16, Malika Jabali showed by the time you got to the industrial Midwest, that vote got a hell of a lot closer when you're talking about places with that track with everything else, strong labor unions, as an example.
Right. Yeah, that's exactly right. And I'm glad you call it for what it is, because that belief and assertion is like the quintessence of fucking racism, right? I mean, how can it not be, right? Well, in the first place, it rests on a premise that races exist, right, as unitary entities. Well, I mean, look it up, right? I don't know if in Webster's, but certainly in the 1940s, 49, 51, whatever, UN statements on race, that's the essence of racism. Well, it's got to be the essence of racism. I don't even need to cite a book on that, right? Because it's categorically true. So what does that leave us then? And what I would say about this is, and this is something else that was clear in 2016, has been even more clear since 2016, that notion, right? I mean, that insistence that we understand all problems that affect Black people or other not white people, including Sicilians. But well, no, I'm just joking about that. But as through a lens of race, is fundamentally a class program, because the race, just like the Black vote or the Black community, is a ventriloquist dummy, and it's a ventriloquist dummy that the aspirational PMC are the Edgar Bergens of. Right now, that's a really old reference, but you get the drift.
I'm trusting your instincts that you're a funny man. That's how I'm laughing at that reference. But so that this, and you actually, yes, you relate this to also, and again, you can internationalize it to make it even kind of less outside of the edginess, if you want, of some of these, conversations. But what is the difference between, we need to, liberate the Kurds in Turkey as an oppressed group, right, and then also as workers, right, and also as subjects of the state, versus, right, we want to create a narrow lane of patronage networks that represents, right, but does not actually, right, liberate a community, let alone, right, the broader problems of hierarchy and oppression and exploitation in Turkish society. Is that the point, the drift?
No, absolutely. And I just add as a footnote that, and like this is, I mean, maybe, well, I'm not sure what the sources are, but I've noticed since Katanga and the secessionist movement in the Congo, right, that these culturally autonomous peoples who yearn to be free also tend to be sitting on extractive, on minerals, diamonds, copper, oil, uranium, and the two just kind of reinforce each other a little bit too.
Right. Adolph Reed Jr., we appreciate you. You'll be back on again hopefully next month, really as often as you can. Folks, everybody order class notes. Read Adolph's work.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. And I'll talk to you soon.
Okay, great. Thanks man. Take care.
Always.
And thanks once again for having me.
Oh, please. Thank you. You just watched a Michael Brooks Show video. Subscribe to get them all. Why wouldn't you? Don't be foolish. Click subscribe below and become a patron as well. Patreon.com/TMBS. Thanks, everybody.